Welcome back to another edition of the Supply Chainy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Chaney. Today we're going to talk about the intersection of law and the supply chain, maybe more specifically logistics and transportation and the law. I'll let Craig talk more about it whenever he gets up on the stage here. So Craig and I met the other day at the TIA regional meeting here in Frisco, Texas, just north of Dallas, and he was a panelist. And man, he shared some really interesting stories. I really asked him to come on today so he could talk about Taco Bell and Mentos. And so I'm really hoping that he can kind of bring that back again, because man, the stories that he gets to hear these days as he's working on fraud and freight theft and all these sort of things that we're talking about in the world of transportation these days, it seems like Craig's got a front row seat to all that. And I really wanted to highlight this topic here on the podcast. And so I was really happy to meet him the other day, and even more happy that he agreed to come on and talk with us a little bit. So Craig, thanks for coming on the podcast today. Can you introduce yourself in a little bit more detail than I just did?
Sure. Craig Helmreich, president and founder of Helmreich Law, based just north of Indianapolis, Indiana. We're a small transportation law firm, 4 people working remotely. 3 of us are in Indiana, 1's in Philly. Focus of our practice, 75% of our clients are brokers, 20% are carriers, and then we've got 5% that are shippers that typically have brokers or carriers in their operations. Been practicing transportation law for 24 years, the first 21 at a large firm, and the last 3-year anniversary is about a week away on our own. And really happy to be here. Wonderful to meet you at the TIA Regional this week.
Congratulations on making your 3-year anniversary of being out on your own. Can you talk a little bit about what your formative years were in the industry and kind of how you got down this path of logistics and transportation in the first place?
Yeah, I sold a camcorder when I was a senior at Butler to a partner in a transportation law firm. And unbeknownst to me, he told his other partners that if I could sell him an $800 camcorder, I could sell a jury anything. So it wasn't really part of my plan to end up in a transportation law firm. It just kind of was the job opportunity that I had at the time. And it's been a wonderful, a happy accident. You can't do anything without trucks and transportation. And so in a good economy, there's a ton of work. In a bad economy, the work is different, but there's still a ton of work. And so it's been kind of a wonderful spot. As I watch people that do banking law or mergers and acquisitions or, other kind of more traditional legal careers have their work go up and down, our work has been steady and solid for more than 2.5 decades.
Does that speak to the litigious nature of American way of doing business?
I think it really speaks to, in transportation, the operators have an attitude, and it's the right attitude, of move freight first and worry about everything else second. And so sometimes the details, you kind of need a bad experience. You need the truck to hit the bridge, to have the interesting event that then you learn from, and you do everything differently next time, or you have the fraud or the theft or the contract dispute with a customer. And so a lot of times we're addressing things to correct them so that the client doesn't have to deal with it, ever again. In our practice, we actively try to avoid litigation. I mean, we have 30 to 50 litigation cases going at all times, but that's not where you want to be. Nobody benefits from litigation. It's everybody loses if you're litigating. So we try to avoid it 99.5% of the time. Sometimes that's the most fun for me. I had a case years ago where 2 shipments were stolen, and it was going to be $1 million loss, and we had a broker, and so we got to argue that F4A preemption preempted claims for cargo loss and damage against brokers, and we won. And so the client gets off for $0, and it was $1 million issue. And when the delta between you is 0 to $1 million, you're going to litigate that because you're just never going to agree on something in the middle. So those are fun, particularly when you win them. But if you can avoid it, so many of these things are $40,000 issues. And in Carmack cases, in cargo claim cases, nobody gets their attorney fees. And so, everybody's eating away towards the middle from the beginning. And we like to have that frank discussion with the other side right from the beginning that, look, if you pay us 20 now, like, we're all fine. If we win and spend 20 to get 40, then we net 20. And if you win and spend 20 to win, it's the same thing. So, like, why don't we just meet in the middle from the beginning? So a lot of times that's kind of, a component of the discussion, especially if the facts are gray.
It feels like you probably bring out your calculator and your business sort of finance sort of journals just as much as you bring out your law books, I suppose.
I always tell people that I picked law school because I heard there would be no math. And there's math every single day. It's simple arithmetic. I mean, it's not calculus or anything heavy. But you're definitely kind of thinking what's the best for the client, what's the best net result. If you're not thinking that way, you're doing a disservice for the client. How much are they going to have to spend to get the result? What are the chances that they can achieve a result better than X? And how much are they going to have to spend to achieve?
How have you seen the evolution of that industry from a legal perspective evolve over the years?
Yeah, it's been crazy. There's been a lot of change. It's been 100% transportation for me from when I started in 2000. And it's always been broker and carrier heavy, although we do a little bit of ocean and air. And it's just kind of been the situations that are presented that kind of broaden, the things that you're good at. So as in the middle 2000s, there were a string of customer bankruptcies. And so clients kept calling saying, like, how do we collect our money when our customers are going bankrupt? And so that became a sub practice of mine of, Montgomery Ward's is bankrupt. They owe us $200,000. How do we get those freight charges, out of the trustee in bankruptcy? And you just kind of add a new trick every time there's a new experience, and then you kind of hang on to it forever, and it just becomes part of what you do. But in terms of changes, it's cyclical. So the bankruptcy work, the collection work, is in a bad economy. When shipper customers are suffering or going out of business, and when carriers and brokers need to collect from those suffering customers, we have much more collection work and bankruptcy work. In a good economy, you can go 6 years without having a bankruptcy case. I don't think we had any between 2014 and 2020, which is wild. But in a good economy, it's a lot more contract work. It's a lot more, here are the terms. Can we get better terms than what we had last time? And there's just new work to be gained, daily. And so everybody's throwing contracts.
So in good times, you're helping businesses grow, and then in bad times, you're helping businesses deal with a economy that's suffering and the consequences.
And in both economies, we're doing cargo claims, because cargo claims are the same either way. Something goes wrong, stuff gets lost or damaged or stolen, and there are more cargo claims in a bad economy because I think shippers are using it as a way to maybe manage inventory a little bit, or maybe a claim that they would have let go when they were making money that they now see as a way to pad the bottom line a little bit. So
makes sense. That makes sense. What about technology? I would imagine when you started, everything was on paper and wet signed ink and all that sort of stuff. And now we've got like DocuSign, and we've got cameras everywhere, and everything's got electric sort of signatures and tracking and tracing going on. How is that made your job easier because there's just a better paper trail, digital paper trail on things, or has it made it harder?
No, I think it's easier. I mean, the old school guys will always tell you about like when the fax machine was invented or when they got their first email and how it changed the practice of law to be kind of immediate. And, in the old days, people would mail you responses to letters. I mean, the amount of time between things was kind of more spread out. Now, court hearings are still mostly remote. Like I did a hearing last week in California, did one the week before in Florida, and I didn't leave this desk in my house. So technology has certainly made it more efficient to practice law, In the old days, we would have flown to California and wasted a whole day, maybe two for a 30-minute hearing. And now you plug in for that hearing and you disconnect when it's over, and the client only pays for 30 minutes instead of 2 days. So there's a lot more efficient.
Your billable hours are suffer a little bit as a result of that efficiency.
Yeah, which is good, right? Because it's from a client-centric view, the only legal work that the client's getting is those 30 minutes and whatever prep time it took for those 30 minutes. And so in the modern era, clients are really paying for the legal services, not for the attorney flying to California and back. I still remember writing a memo in 2011 on e-sign and UEDA, and how e-signatures had the force and effect of a wet signature. And it was okay, everyone, chill out. Like, we can sign independent contractor agreements with digital signatures. We can, do broker carrier agreements with digital signatures. It's been slow. Transportation is sometimes slow to adopt new technology, but it certainly makes it a lot easier. These days, almost 100% of the contracts we see are digitally executed. And we see about 35 contracts a week. Tons and tons of contracts, and I can't even imagine how slow it would be.
You've been working on building your own business here for a few years. I'm kind of in a similar boat, trying to work on building a business up as well. And so I feel like, compared to in the past, the software as a service ability to have so many things just in the cloud. You pay $20 a month for an accounting program, and you pay a little bit for a Slack for a messaging program. And there's all these little tools you can put together, so that I feel like the obstacles to become a business these days it doesn't take a lot. Can you talk about just kind of what you've kind of gone through in building a business and kind of how you're approaching it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan of investing in the technology that makes it easier to do your job, makes you more efficient. For law firms, there's a piece of software called Clio. I love Clio. Clio does timekeeping for us. It does billing. It does some basic accounting functions. It's where all the files for each of the clients are set up and organized. And then you can link it out to other software so that you can make it talk to QuickBooks. You can make it talk to your document management system. So we use NetDocs because it's incredibly secure kind of document management system. And so you can get Clio to kind of talk to NetDocs, and every time you open a file in Clio, it opens a file in NetDocs and syncs everything up. And so I'm a big fan of those two pieces of software. Microsoft 365, I guess in the old days you paid for a license maybe one time. Now everything you're going to pay for annually or monthly, so we're going to be paying for Microsoft 365 forever, I'm pretty sure. And I'm a big fan of Mimecast, one of the security software that keeps people from accidentally clicking a link that's going to give a bad actor access to your Microsoft 365. Because we all know 365 is probably as vulnerable, or maybe not as vulnerable, but as attacked as any piece of software that's out there. And so I definitely believe in adding plugins and add-ons that kind of keep you from accidentally granting somebody access to those things. I'm a huge fan of two-factor authentication in all software. Just the idea that to change something major, you're going to have to type in a 6-digit code off of your cell phone. I wish all my clients believed in the same thing. Maybe we wouldn't be talking about banking information being changed as often as we are, or other things like that if everybody used two-factor authentication. But I agree with you. In today's world, there are so many pieces of software and tech that are customized to each of our businesses that allow us to more easily stand alone. And, we're 4 people, in various cities across the country, and we function as a medium-sized law firm.
To that end, can you talk a little about the culture, any sort of things that you do, because you are not all, in an office, you don't see each other. Are there any little things that you try to do to kind of feel like a company and a culture?
Yeah, our first year we did monthly bonuses because everybody likes a surprise money. And as we were growing the firm, our projections were wrong on the low side every single month, and so there was extra every single month. And so we thought, well, why Why have people wait till the end of the year and see if they're going to get a bonus? Let's do a bonus the 15th of every single month. And so that was a fun way to kind of figure out what the numbers were and grow it together. And every month was kind of, interesting and exciting. I think of all the things that Big Law does wrong. And some of them are client facing and some of them are, team facing. We do a 16% contribution into everyone's 401k as a profit share every year, not as a match, just straight up. And so if somebody makes 200k in our firm, they're getting $32,000 in their 401k. And it's stuff like that makes you say, well, we don't have office space, right? We're not paying 50% of our revenue to rent Class A office space. We're all setting up these spaces in our houses, and so that allows us to do creative things like the 401k, or initially all three of the four of us were on our spouse's insurance. But the first time I heard one of my people didn't have insurance, we stopped everything and we added a health insurance plan because we don't want people uninsured working for us. That's silly. And so kind of having a team atmosphere and kind of, all in it together and how do I get my people to retire when they want to retire? Well, our 401k is a great step towards that. And, how do we keep morale up? Well, I'm not just the one making all the money in this firm. Like when we have a month where we're ahead of schedule, everybody gets a bonus. So it's stuff like that. We set 3 goals for 2023. We hit all of them by October. So in November, we took everybody and their spouses and significant others to Chicago to the Four Seasons for a 4-day weekend.
That's awesome. I hope someone listening got some good ideas from that. But it's really great to hear some of those ideas, some of them I haven't heard before. So it's, as entrepreneurs, it's great to pick up some best practices that other folks are trying out and that can share. So thanks for that. You shared some great nuggets of wisdom as far as kind of the statistics of what's really being targeted these days, some of the methods and ways that bad actors are going about. Can you kind of go through some of those statistics and share some of those insights?
Yeah, I think fraud and theft is probably 10 times as common right now as it ever has been in the 24 years that I've been doing this. We used to get a call about a stolen load or a fraudulent situation. And by fraud, I mean somebody's impersonating a shipper, a broker, a carrier, and pretending, to be that party so that they can either steal the shipment or so that they can, get paid for moving the shipment even though they're not going to move it. And then they plan on not paying the person they get to move the shipment. So there's all kinds of different avenues of fraud and theft. But we're just seeing just such a proliferation of it. I'm not sure I tend to think it's a combination of a bad economy, has made transportation service providers hungrier than they have been, and they're checking less details. They're glad to have a shipment. They're glad to have somebody to move that shipment, and so because it's been kind of a stark reality, particularly for brokers, for a little while. I think we're letting some things slip through the cracks because everybody wants to make sure that they're moving freight, and they don't recognize that the email address is off by a letter, or that the phone number's been changed, or that it's not ABC Carriers Inc., it's ABC Carriers LLC, and it's just slightly different. And so sometimes they get fooled by these imposters. I also think that more people have shipment information in their hands right now than ever before. I think the existence of dispatch services and the use of overseas companies to kind of help manage transportation just puts the documents in a lot of different hands. And if any of those hands are a bad actor, then they make copies of those documents or take cell phone pictures of those documents, and now somebody's got everything they need to steal the shipment. And so, it's, my favorite story lately to tell has been, it used to be televisions and copper, that we were worried about. Those were the shipments that got stolen. And they got stolen in a really I don't want to say amusing, that's the wrong term, but an interesting kind of way, right? The truck driver would be conditioned to believe that you use less fuel if you don't turn off the truck. And so the truck driver parks at a gas station to go inside and get a Snickers and leaves the truck running, locks it, takes a second set of keys with him. And all the thief had to do was have a small hammer, break the driver's side door window on the truck, unlock it himself, and drive it away because the keys were in it. And so, that was the way that shipments got stolen, in the first 10 years that I practiced. And it was always televisions or copper or laptop computers, or I'm going to date myself, but I had a $2 million theft of iPods, dozen years ago or so. Don't even exist anymore. The people that are listening are like, how old is this guy?
Yeah.
But it was electronics, and it was precious metals and things like that were super easy to sell. And in the last 3 months, I've had more shipments of Oreos and Mentos and Trident and other kind of small dollar foodstuffs that are being stolen. And I think it's interesting, that I was kind of shocked when I had my first Oreo shipment, and then Mentos followed right after, and then Trident. And the FBI is involved in some of these cases, so I have to be a little bit cautious about what I say because they're ongoing. But the FBI agent that I was talking to said, of course that's what they're stealing. Every corner store needs these things. And if a thief offers them to a corner store at a third of the price of what Nabisco offers it to the corner store, they have a willing buyer on every single corner in the country. And that makes a lot of sense. And so we see kind of skimming thefts right now, where a shipment of Oreos will go from city A to city B, and it'll just get pulled off 10 minutes off the road somewhere into a warehouse. And the thieves will use pretty high-powered magnets on a crane to hold the rear doors in place and keep the seal intact, and then take the pins out of the doors so that you pull the entire doors off the trailer, take 20% out of the shipment, change the bill of lading so that it only looks like 80% was there in the first place, and then deliver it. And at delivery, if nobody's checking the electronic records, if they're just checking the paper looks like what's in the truck. And so the skimming isn't even noticed until you do an inventory of that warehouse, 3 to 6 to 9 months later. And hopefully, you haven't run another dozen shipments through the same carrier and had the same thing happen. But that's kind of the most prevalent type of theft that we're seeing right now, is small dollar foodstuffs. And a skimming of 10 or 20% of the shipment.
Some years ago, I was working for a company, Main Freight, and I was checking out some of their facilities in New Zealand, and they were talking about, they used to do like Jack Daniels and whiskey and stuff, and they would wrap it in black shrink wrap and pallets of whiskey and stuff. And what was happening is folks could reach their hand in the middle and just grab one box out of the middle of this pallet, and it was all black shrink wrapped and whatnot anyway. So you couldn't verify and count very well on the outbound end, and you weren't going to do a very good job when you're receiving it as well until you're putting it all away and starting to pick it again. So this was 10 years ago, but just that little one by one sort of things just kind of grow feet and walk away a little bit. What about impersonating a shipper, or there was a particular like ramen noodle situation I think that you brought up on stage the other day?
Yeah, I had never had a fake shipper scenario until about a year ago. And we were talking about a client and I were talking about $1 million problem they had, and it was one of those discussions that was difficult, right? Because they had $1 million problem and there wasn't a great way out of it other than paying $1 million. And the client said, "Hey, let's talk about something positive instead. We got a great new client." And I said, "Well, great. Let's talk about that. People only call me about bad news. Let's talk about good news." And they said, "We got Taco Bell." And it was a broker client of mine. And I said, "Well, that's great. How'd you get Taco Bell? And what are you moving for them?" And it's just small talk. And they said, "Well, they came in through our front door. They emailed us at info@broker.com on our website. And we're moving ramen noodles, of all things." And I said, you did not get Taco Bell. Like, this is a fake shipper. There's no way. There's nothing at Taco Bell that uses ramen noodles. And Fortune 50 companies don't email brokers and say, congratulations, we've selected you to haul our products, before they have. You spend years trying to get the meeting with those people. And this kind of goes back to the culture that we all have to establish right now, where you need to be skeptical of everything, to quote the X-Files, trust no one, and assume that everybody is out to get you, because they are, and these fake shipper scams have now, I've seen more than 30 of them in a year, where somebody pretends to be the shipper and contacts a broker and says, I'd really like you to move this. The fake shipper obviously knows a product that's in the marketplace and ready to be moved. I had it with 10 shipments of olive oil recently. And the fake shipper, used the name of the olive oil company, pretended to be the olive oil company, gave the shipments to a broker. And when the broker assigned the carrier to those shipments, the fake shipper asked for the contact information for the carrier and then shifted the destination, reconsigned them from New York to Miami. And so, we have to be creative. We used to not tell our shipper customers, when we were a broker, who the carrier was that was going to pick the shipment up, because we were protecting the identity of our carriers so that they couldn't do business with them directly. Now, I think we have to shift, and we have to tell our shippers who the carrier is and ask them to validate the carrier when they arrive, and not load the carrier if a different carrier shows up. And more importantly, maybe right now, ask the driver that arrives, hey, where are you taking this shipment, before you give them the paperwork. So that if there's a fake shipper involved and they're trying to send it to they're always sending it to an empty Kmart parking lot. It's like there'll be 2 U-Haul trucks waiting in a Kmart parking lot in Miami. And the truck driver somehow pulls up and thinks it's a great idea to let people unload the truck into 2 U-Hauls in a deserted parking lot. So we have to all kind of work together to recognize the things that just don't make sense and kind of catch the fraud.
Is there anyone that's doing something smart about training their frontline workers on all these things to look out for? Because that's, for me, as someone running a warehouse, or that I have in the past, that's the thing that concerns me is educating everyone that touches those trucks that are coming in to pick up, letting them know all the things that Craig, and all the scary stories you've heard. Do you have any suggestions for those folks running those facilities to be able to provide that knowledge to their workforce so that they know what to look for and raise their hand when something looks weird?
Yeah, I think that you've hit a nail on the head. I think the reason why we're all susceptible to so much fraud and theft is because we're a very soft target. Drivers like to say, hey, I didn't know, I didn't stand out to me, and warehouse operators say the same thing. And we talk about this stuff at an executive level or at a management level, but it just doesn't trickle down to the operations team. And so it's kind of developing that culture of catching things, and that the culture can be reinforced a lot of different ways. I have some brokers that have been really creative about creating email lists that once a day, tell all the sales team, about the fraud that Joe caught on the West Coast today. And it kind of creates a culture, at least, where the sales team in a brokerage is looking out and trying to show off with the bad actors that they catch and identify. And then you have your own team teaching the rest of your team the lessons that they learn. And I think you can do that in a warehouse environment also. The warehouse operators, I think, tend to run a checklist. Here are the things that I'm supposed to do when a new shipment comes in. And if you just change the checklist for them in terms of verify the door signs on the truck, match up with the electronic communication from the broker that tells you what name should be on those door signs, maybe write down the plate number on the vehicle so that we can find it later if we need to. There's so many police systems across the country that are capturing license plate numbers. When we have a plate number, we can almost always use traffic cameras to find where that vehicle is within a handful of hours. And so, just recording the plate number, or knowing which facilities have video, so that you can read the door sign. If you missed it when they were in live, but we can check it a couple hours later if we need to. Check the door signs on the truck, check the plate on the trailer. And the simple thing of, just kind of training people if something feels off. I have a case, I didn't get to talk about this one this week, but I should have. I had a case where a bunch of personal watercraft were stolen. And the drivers that showed up had the correct motor carrier's name on the door sign, but it was written in black Sharpie on a piece of copy paper that was duct taped to the door. And so that should have stood out as a problem. But maybe what should have stood out more as a problem was the fact that both the drivers were in black sweatsuits, head to toe, with black ski masks on. And when the warehouse operator said, "Why the ski masks, guys? It's the middle of summer," and the driver said, "COVID." It's summer of 2023 and COVID is the excuse for why you're in all black and wearing a ski mask. And of course, those personal watercraft disappeared and were never seen again. And there was enough red flags there that the warehouse should not have loaded, that truck. And it's an unfortunate situation that could have been stopped and wouldn't have resulted in, me suing somebody to try to track down hundreds of thousands of dollars.
All the stories that you're saying right now, all to me just smack of blockchain could be the solution here, kind of. That blockchain, again, it's, even though it's supposed to be old, outdated, like that was water under the bridge, it's gone. But, that whole not being able to interfere with the chain of custody of documents and data and information, and being able to prove the genuine nature of parties that are part of this transaction, it sounds to me like, man, this is something, this is kind of what blockchain was made for, is to secure things like this and processes and handoffs from party to party to make sure that there's immutable contracts and things going on. I know I think people might be starting to think I'm being paid by the blockchain, conglomerate out there to talk about it, but I do see like there's some use cases where it feels like it could help.
So when I think of blockchain, I think of this would definitely work for a bill of lading, and you wouldn't be able to change the numbers of items in the shipment if we were all on a blockchain bill of lading. But it would, right now the bill of lading is pretty much being emailed from the shipper to the broker and from the broker to the carrier that they use. And there's no consistent tack being employed other than email and PDFs. And that's the problem, is we would need everybody to get onto systems. And so much of our transportation is done by small motor carriers. If you look at it, there's probably 30% of the volume is done by carriers who have less than 10 trucks. And so those are the carriers that are going to be difficult to get them to invest in any more things other than the truck and the fuel and the tires, and the handful of people that they have. So definitely would solve it. The trouble is just going to be, none of us, we're all entrepreneurs, right? You, me, and everybody in transportation. And none of us want to create a system where the only people that are left are the top 50. Top 50 could implement blockchain today, and it would certainly cut down a lot of risk and exposure. And they're probably all in the process of doing it. But there's so much stuff that moves with the 1 to 10 truck motor carrier, and we have a capacity problem, in lots of places still. So we need the 1 to 10 truck motor carriers, and they'll be the top 50 of tomorrow too. Like, some of those people will be the success stories. That's the American dream.
Sure, for sure. It's the old battle between safety and security and efficiency and flow of goods and people and data. And if we put too many safety protocols and stuff in place, it's going to slow down just the speed of transactions and the speed of commerce.
Move freight first, worry about everything else second.
Move freight first and think about all the details later is probably one of the things I'm going to take away from this conversation in general. And you're right, it's get stuff moved and figure out the details and take care of that stuff later. It's take care of the customer, get the truck there on time. That's what matters.
Especially as ancillary service providers in transportation, right? Like, nobody's going to use me if I get in the way of the business that they have. And so we have to support the volume that they have and not reduce their volume by, getting in the way of it. So you have to support the moving of the freight, and then you try to teach the lessons where you can and nibble around the edges to make it better and safer and more secure and less, just less risk to the whole equation where you can.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface here on the topics that we could have covered, but I do believe that folks could probably look you up and meet here and chat with you a little bit more if they wanted to. And there's so many different avenues and sort of stones to uncover when we're talking about the fraud and theft that's going on these days. But I just appreciate you coming on and sharing a couple of those stories with us. Hopefully some of these things helped open eyes for some warehouse managers, some brokers and carriers to help them be more vigilant. So thanks, Craig, for coming on. Any last words from your side?
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a good third anniversary in business. Congratulations.
Thanks. Very much appreciated.